This decades-old maple leaf-clad superhero is staging a comeback. A symbol of Canadian pride, Captain Canuck has reemerged from the shadows to fight for his country. His new arch-nemesis, American President Donald Trump.
All of a sudden, Trump gets into office, and he starts talking about annexation and tariffs. And yes, all of a sudden, Canadians are looking to Captain Canuck as a symbol. And it's basically, to them, Captain Canuck symbolizes independence.
Comic book creator Richard Cumley introduced Canadians to Captain Canuck in 1975.
This is the first issue.
Since then, the comic book series has been in and out of publication. But Cumley has seen renewed interest in the Canadian superhero, portrayed manhandling Trump and his billionaire advisor, Elon Musk, in this recent sketch.
We're getting more and more calls from Canadian companies who are expressing some keen interest in Captain Canuck, largely because of what's happening between America and Canada at this very time. So, in a sense, we have Mr. Trump to thank for a bit of resurgence.
Cumley's Captain Canuck comics and memorabilia were on display at the Vancouver Comic and Toy Show in early April. The comic book character, a Mountie endowed with superhuman strength after an alien encounter, has been beloved for years by some, including longtime fan Ron Roxburgh.
I found Captain Canuck at issue number 6, which was back in the early 80s. It was the first Canadian comic I had ever seen, so it kind of blew my mind.
America had Captain America, and we should have our own. And that was the thinking, and that was my thinking. And it wasn't as if I was so super conscious of it. It was just like, okay, there's a niche to be filled here. And that was the beginning, and it was well received.
Cumley says Trump's sweeping tariffs on Canadian imports and his musing about making Canada the 51st state has provided plenty of new inspiration for Captain Canuck's 50th anniversary issue.
I'm sort of predicting in the series that Canada is now recognized as a world power, mostly because of all the resources that are here in this country. I mean, and Canada is full of everything, all the resources you can imagine, from water to minerals to what have you. And so I envision Canada being recognized for that, in my stories. And then, but at the same time, needing more protection from terrorists and other groups that wanted to basically infiltrate Canada or destabilize Canada and take over Canada. So I was already dealing with those kind of issues. Of course, never in any of those stories was it America that was going to be taking over Canada. It was always the Russians or crazy groups of multinational groups.
While concerned about Trump's rhetoric, Cumley believes the U.S. will back off its northern neighbor eventually. And he says his Captain Canuck storyline has a happy ending.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday allowed Donald Trump to pursue deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members using a law dating back to 1798 with certain limits. Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act on March 15th to swiftly deport the alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang. The law has historically been used only in wartime and is best known for its use to intern Japanese, Italian, and German immigrants during World War II. The same day, a Washington-based judge blocked the deportations, but Trump's administration allowed 2 planes already in the air to continue to El Salvador to be placed in the Central American country's terrorism confinement center. The administration has argued the judge had encroached on presidential authority to make national security decisions. On Monday, the Supreme Court granted the administration's request to lift the judge's order in an unsigned 5-4 ruling in which conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett and the court's 3 liberal justices dissented. However, the court's majority placed limits on how deportations may occur and emphasized that judicial review is required. The majority wrote that detainees, quote, must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the act, and that, quote, the notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. The ruling said the court was not resolving the validity of the administration's reliance on the law to carry out the deportations. The dissenting justices, in an opinion written by Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor, criticized the majority's, quote, dubious conclusions in the case and for acting with just a few days of deliberation. Lee Gallant, a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union and the lead counsel representing the detainees, framed the court's decision as a win for his side, saying, quote, "The critical point is that the Supreme Court said individuals must be given due process to challenge their removal under the Alien Enemies Act. That is an important victory."
Tout me manque. Ma famille, mes amis, mes ennuis, comme on dit mes emmerdes et mes amours. Donc tout me manque en fait. Pour moi, c'est comme ça que je résume le tout, tu vois.
Moussa Sako is in Mali, but not by choice. It's his country by birth, but he moved to France as a young child to treat a chronic eye condition. He spent much of his life in a Paris suburb.
Pour moi, je suis à l'extérieur, tu vois. Donc, je suis dans une bulle. Je suis ni en Europe, ni en Afrique. Je suis dans une bulle. Entre guillemets, cette bulle-là, quand elle va éclater, où je vais atterrir.
Last year, Sako was in France and spent many days volunteering with a community association called Angar. He helped with food distribution, events, and counseling. He made friends there.
Qu'aider les autres, il s'aidait lui-même. Et ça, c'est ça qui m'a fait beaucoup de peine dans l'expulsion de Moussa, c'est qu'à un moment donné où il sortait la tête de l'eau, et il retournait encore pire qu'avant. Enfin, il retournait dans une situation qui était vraiment très très compliquée.
Asia Belhadi is a co-founder of Angar, where Sako volunteered. Last May, French police raided the organization looking for squatters. Sako was on overnight duty as a supervisor and arrested. In the raid, he lost his glasses, adjusted for his eye condition. Police cited a prior conviction for selling marijuana, for which Sako completed a 12-month prison sentence, as evidence he was a, quote, real, current, and serious enough threat. On July 2nd, he was escorted onto a flight to Bamako, the capital of Mali. He is banned for 2 years from applying for a French visa.
Et donc, j'imagine même pas l'impuissance qu'il a dû ressentir et puis la déception, en fait.
It was not the first time the government had tried to deport Sako over his drug conviction. In 2022, a French court overturned an attempt to deport Sako on grounds he settled in France as a child. The ruling, seen by Reuters, said Sako was entitled to temporary residency.
Je suis français. C'est pas je me sens, c'est je le suis en fait. Je ne renie pas le Mali. Hein. Je suis né au Mali, oui. J'ai fait ma vie en France, donc je suis français.
But last year, French immigration reforms put hundreds of foreign nationals such as Sako in new jeopardy. Reuters interviewed 40 people, including Sako, others affected by the new law, rights advocates, lawyers, and researchers, for a detailed look at the impact of France's 2024 immigration reform. The change removed previous protections for foreign nationals who settled in France before the age of 13, those with French children, a French spouse, or a serious medical condition. French authorities say the measures responded to public demand for stricter controls and the removal of foreign nationals who threatened public order.
Il ne s'agit pas d'être contre l'immigration ou pour l'immigration, mais de pouvoir contrôler l'immigration et pour un pays souverain comme le nôtre, de définir ce que nous souhaitons comme type d'immigration et quelles armes administratives, juridiques nous mettons en place pour à la fois accueillir, pour reconduire et pour intégrer les personnes qui, depuis toujours, viennent dans notre pays pour pouvoir vivre.
Polls show public support for the law. France's Constitutional Council rejected elements of the legislation last year, but the new deportation rules remained. Interior Ministry data show deportations rose 27% in 2024 to 22,000. Many of those deported or facing deportation have, like Sako, prior criminal records for which they've served sentences long ago. Lawyers and activists say these cases display overzealous enforcement that upturned lives. And the lower bar for deportations raised concerns, including in French court decisions, that the new rules clash with the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 8, on the right to a private and family life.
Donc tout ça, c'est le drame de l'expulsion que les migrants vont toujours subir dans leur parcours d'expulsion.
Ousmane Diarra is the president of a group in Mali advocating for those sent here against their will.
C'est très grave, c'est très dangereux pour lui, l'expulsé, et pour son entourage familial. Il s'agit de la femme qui est laissée ici, la maman, le papa. Donc, il était un espoir.
In January, Sako's friends at Ngar called him to check in. They asked if he had any good news. He said, "We're waiting. I'm waiting."
T'attends?
They replied, "You're waiting? We're waiting then. I'll wait with you."
Gabon holds a presidential election on Saturday, the first since a 2023 coup ended the Bongo family's 56-year dynasty. The country's new military rulers hope the vote will legitimise and cement their hold on power. Officers led by Brice Oligui Nguema took power in August 2023, the last in a 3-year wave of coups that swept West and Central Africa. Nguema promised to hand back power to civilians, but declared himself head of the transitional government and last month announced his candidacy for president. His main challenger is Bongo's former Prime Minister, Alain-Claude Bilibenze, who tried to distance himself from the Bongo regime. Nguema is tipped to win given his advantages as incumbent and his popularity as the architect of the end to Bongo's unpopular rule. His message of Gabon rising from the ashes has resonated with supporters.
In past elections, we already knew what to expect. Today, as they say, it's a glimmer of hope. Personally, that's what it is. I saw a glimmer of hope on August the 30th. And really, I decided to participate in this election to change things.
Nguema also has a tight hold on power with the Senate, National Assembly and Constitutional Court, stacked with loyalists, according to political analysts. Gabon is a sparsely populated country of around 2.5 million people, where for decades a small political elite surrounding the Bongo family lived in oil-funded luxury. Since the military takeover in 2023, the economy has grown, driven in part by infrastructure projects implemented by the transitional government and increased production of commodities such as oil, manganese and timber, the World Bank says. Still, the country is over-reliant on its oil fields, output from which has long been in decline. They are among the first deaths directly attributed to aid cuts imposed by US President Donald Trump. 8 people in South Sudan suffering from cholera who died last month on a 3-hour walk to seek medical treatment, according to Save the Children. The UK-based charity blames the deaths on Trump's cuts, which it says forced local services to close. Here's Save the Children's South Sudan country director, Christopher Niamandi.
Generally, we are receiving less and less funding from all donors, including the European donors, right? But the US funding generally was the more drastic because the implication was funding that we actually secured, where we were actually implementing and delivering services and doing work, and we had to stop on those activities.
He added that there should be, quote, global moral outrage that the decisions made by powerful people in other countries have led to child deaths in just a matter of weeks. Experts have warned the cuts, including the cancellation of more than 90% of USAID's contracts, could cost millions of lives in coming years due to malnutrition, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria and other diseases. The US State Department said it did not have information about the reported deaths. A spokesperson said many US government programs remained active, but support for medical services had also been used to enrich the country's leaders. South Sudan's government has acknowledged a significant amount of public corruption, but denied specific accusations of graft. Save the Children supported 27 health facilities in East and South Sudan until earlier this year. The US cuts forced 7 to shut completely and 20 to close partially, the organisation said in a statement. Over a third of South Sudan's roughly 12 million people have been displaced by either conflict or natural disaster. The United Nations says the country could also be on the brink of a new civil war after fighting broke out in February in the northeast. A cholera outbreak declared last October has caused hundreds of deaths, the World Health Organization has said.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Rory McIlroy back to the media centre.
You know, I think instinctually as human beings we hold back sometimes because of the fear of getting hurt, whether that's a conscious decision or a subconscious decision. And I think I was doing that on the golf course a little bit for a few years. But I think once you go through that, and once you go through those heartbreaks, as I call them, or disappointments, you get to a place where you remember how it feels, and you wake up the next day, and you're like, yeah, life goes on. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and I think that's especially in recent memory, where the last few years I've had chances to win some of the biggest golf tournaments in the world. It hasn't quite happened, but life moves on, and you dust yourself off and you go again. And I think that's why I've become a little more comfortable in, laying everything out there and being somewhat vulnerable at times.
Was that?
No, it's just narratives, it's noise, and it's just trying to block out that noise as much as possible. I need to treat this tournament like, all the other tournaments that I play throughout the year, and look, I understand the narrative and the noise, and there's a lot of anticipation and build up and coming into this tournament each and every year, but I just have to keep my head down and focus on my job. Yeah, I think, I've, over the course of my career, I feel like I've showed quite a lot of resilience from setbacks. And I feel like I've done the same again, especially, post June last year, and, the golf that I've played since then. And it's something that I'm really proud of. Look, you have setbacks and you have disappointments, but as long as you can learn from them and move forward and try to put those learnings into practice, I think is very, very important. I feel like I've showed that quite a lot over the course of my career. For the first time in a long time, I'm reading a novel. I actually got some fiction into my life. It's a John Grisham book.
Which one?
The Reckoning.
Okay.
Yeah. It's got off to a pretty good start.
Nick.
We're pleased to be joined in the interview room by the 2023 Masters champion, Jon Rahm. John, welcome back to Augusta National.
I mean, I think we all would like to see that, but as far as I could tell, and you guys could tell, that's not happening anytime soon. So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that, especially having a week like this one, right? I think all of our concerns should be on this week, and things outside of that, we can let ourselves think about outside this week. Yeah, not my favorite major season last year, that's true. Didn't play great here, didn't play good at the PGA, and wasn't able to even tee it up at the US Open, right? So I was very happy to finish up there at the Open on a very challenging week, at least set the tone hopefully for this year. And I feel like I'm playing much better golf coming into this week. It's always a debate, right? Is it harder to get there or stay there? And staying there is a lot harder than getting there, I would say. What we've seen Scotty do over the last 3-4 years, it's quite impressive. His ball striking level is outstanding. And anytime you have a year where you're being compared to Tiger in his prime, I don't think I need to add anything else to that, right? I mean, winning 9 times, winning majors, winning FedEx Cups, and just all out being the best throughout the season is quite incredible. And that I can remember, the only 3 players that have won 9 times in a calendar year in a very long time have been Scotty, VJ, and Tiger. So that's a very short list.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced he would pause his reciprocal tariffs on many countries for 90 days, but he raised tariffs further on imports from China. The announcement came less than 24 hours after steep new tariffs kicked in on imports from dozens of trading partners.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
U.S. stocks surged following the announcement, with the benchmark S&P 500 climbing more than 9%. Trump's tariffs had hammered markets, raised the odds of recession, and prompted retaliatory responses from China and the European Union. Trump said he would raise the tariff on Chinese imports to 125%, from the 104% level that took effect at midnight, further escalating a high-stakes confrontation between the world's two largest economies. He said he would at the same time suspend targeted tariffs on other countries for 90 days to allow time for U.S. officials to negotiate with countries that have sought to reduce them. A 10% blanket duty on almost all U.S. imports will remain in place.
Nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well, and they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal.
This is chaos. This is government by chaos.
The top Democrat in the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, blamed Trump for hurting the country, but said he was gratified by the president's latest move.
Donald Trump is feeling the heat from Democrats and across America about how bad these tariffs are. He is reeling, he is retreating, and that is a good thing. We are going to continue to put the heat on him because there are still much damaging tariffs in place.
Since Trump announced broad tariffs late on April 2nd, stocks had fallen more than 12% for their biggest four-day sell-off in 5 years.